The galaxy was filled with countless species, each claiming its place among the stars. But there was one race that had been all but erased from history, their name whispered only in the dark corners of forgotten libraries. The humans. Once, they had been a powerful and influential species, capable of altering the course of entire civilizations. But after a devastating war with a race of advanced beings known as the Zalaran, they had vanished from the galactic stage. The Zalaran had been merciless, wiping out entire human colonies and erasing every trace of their existence. The humans fought back with everything they had, but the Zalaran's technology was too advanced, their military prowess unmatched. In the end, the human resistance was crushed, and the last remnants of humanity were forced into hiding. For centuries, they had lived in the shadows, avoiding detection by the ever-watchful eyes of the Zalaran. But even in the darkest of times, a spark of hope remained. There were those who refused to forget, those who believed that humanity's story was far from over. They formed a secret alliance known as the Last Legacy, dedicated to preserving the memory of the humans who had once ruled the stars. They hid in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, gathering knowledge, artifacts, and anything that might one day help them restore humanity to its rightful place. Among them was a young woman named Lyra, the last descendant of a once great human family. She had grown up hearing stories of the old days, when humans were feared and respected across the galaxy. Her ancestors had been warriors, diplomats, and scientists, their influence stretching across hundreds of star systems. But now, their legacy was all but forgotten, their achievements buried beneath the rubble of a lost war. Lyra had always known that she was destined for something greater. She had inherited the blood of heroes, and she could feel the weight of her ancestors' expectations on her shoulders. But she had never fully understood what that meant, not until the day she discovered the ancient artifact. It had been hidden deep within the ruins of an old human colony, one that had been abandoned long before Lyra's time. She had ventured there with a small group of trusted allies, hoping to find something, anything, that might offer a clue as to what had really happened to her people. What they found was beyond anything they could have imagined. The artifact was a simple thing, at first glance. A small, ornate box covered in strange symbols, its surface worn with age. But when Lyra touched it, the box came to life. A holographic map projected from the center, showing the locations of human colonies that had been wiped from the galaxy's memory. More than that, it contained coordinates to an ancient human ship, lost for centuries, said to hold the key to humanity's survival. Lyra's heart raced as she realized the implications of what they had found. This was no ordinary relic, it was a beacon, a message from the past. The ship, if they could find it, would hold the answers they had been searching for. It was the key to humanity's return. But as soon as the map appeared, so did the Zalaran. They had been watching, waiting for someone to uncover the secret of the human survival. The holographic map had triggered an alarm, and now the Zalaran were closing in. Lyra and her team had no choice but to flee, knowing that the discovery they had made would lead to a new war, one that they might not survive. As they made their way through the ruins, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that their discovery was just the beginning. The humans had been forgotten for far too long, but now the universe would have to reckon with them once again. Whether the galaxy was ready or not, humanity was coming back. But even as they escaped, Lyra knew that the Zalaran were not the only threat they faced. There were other factions, other species, who would see the return of humanity as a threat to their own power. The Last Legacy was not the only force working to bring humanity back. There were those who sought to control the story, to twist it to their own ends. The stage was set for a battle not just for survival, but for the very soul of humanity. And Lyra, with the weight of her ancestors on her shoulders, was determined to make sure that humanity would never be forgotten again. The journey ahead would be dangerous, filled with enemies both old and new. But Lyra knew one thing for certain: the humans who had been forgotten were about to remind the galaxy of their existence, and this time, they would not go quietly into the night. Lyra and her team had barely escaped the Zalaran forces, their ship barely holding together as they made the jump to hyperspace. The map, now safely stored within a secure data crystal, was their only hope. It led to the ancient human ship, a vessel that had vanished without a trace centuries ago, and within its depths, they hoped to find the technology and knowledge necessary to reclaim their place in the galaxy. But the journey ahead was fraught with danger. The Zalaran were relentless, and their search for Lyra's team would be unyielding. With every passing moment, the threat of discovery grew more imminent. Lyra knew they had little time before the Zalaran would be on their tail once more, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Despite the danger, there was a sense of purpose that filled the crew. They weren't just fugitives on the run anymore. They were something more, something with a mission. Lyra's discovery had sparked a fire in each of them. They had a chance to fight back, to reclaim the legacy of the humans who had once ruled the stars. It was a cause worth fighting for, and they would see it through, no matter the cost. As their ship sped through the void, Lyra found herself reflecting on the last few weeks. She had been trained as a historian, but never had she imagined that she would one day become the key to restoring humanity. She had always heard the stories, tales of valor, of conquest, of a species that had once been at the forefront of galactic civilization. But those stories had seemed so distant, so impossible. Now, they were her reality. But even as the hope of humanity's resurgence swirled in her mind, doubts crept in. What if they couldn't find the ship? What if the Zalaran had already destroyed it, or worse, what if it didn't hold the secrets they needed to survive? They were playing a dangerous game, one where failure would mean not just their deaths, but the death of any hope for humanity's future. The crew, a ragtag group of survivors, were all too aware of the stakes. There was Kieran, a former soldier whose entire family had been wiped out during the war with the Zalaran. Then there was Alara, a brilliant scientist who had been researching ancient human technology in secret for years. And finally, there was Eric, a former diplomat who had seen the fall of his people and now, like Lyra, was determined to restore their legacy. As they approached the coordinates indicated by the map, tension gripped the crew. The Zalaran could be close, too close, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead weighed heavily on their minds. Lyra stood in the command center, staring at the projection of the star system they were about to enter. The map had led them to a remote, uncharted sector of space, one that had long been thought to be nothing more than a black hole. But the coordinates were clear, and Lyra had no choice but to trust them. "We'll need to be careful," Alara said, her voice cutting through the silence. "This sector hasn't been mapped in centuries. There could be dangers we don't even know about." Kieran nodded in agreement. "And the Zalaran will be watching. We'll need to stay off their radar at all costs." Lyra took a deep breath, her resolve firming. She had led them this far, and there was no turning back now. "We're getting that ship, no matter what. We're going to find out what happened to humanity, and we're going to make sure we don't fade into obscurity again." As the ship entered the uncharted sector, the stars around them seemed to warp and twist. The strange gravity of the area distorted the light, creating eerie, shimmering distortions in space. But amidst the strange phenomenon, something caught their eyes. It was a shadow in the distance, slowly becoming clearer. A massive, ancient ship, drifting in the vast emptiness, its hull battered and worn from centuries of neglect. But it was unmistakable, this was the ship they had been searching for. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. The ancient vessel was real. It was there, waiting for them. They had found the last hope for humanity. As they docked with the ship, the crew couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This was no ordinary vessel, it was a relic from humanity's golden age, a testament to their power and their brilliance. The ship's technology was unlike anything they had seen before, its systems ancient but still functional. Lyra and her team carefully made their way into the heart of the ship, their eyes scanning every corner for any sign of what they had hoped to find. And then, as they ventured deeper into the ship, they found it, an archive, untouched by time. The secrets of humanity's past were laid bare before them, a treasure trove of knowledge, history, and technology that could change the course of the galaxy forever. Lyra's hands shook as she accessed the first terminal, the data scrolling across the screen. But as she delved deeper into the ship's archives, a chilling realization struck her. The Zalaran had been here before. The ship was not as abandoned as they had believed. The Zalaran had already discovered its secrets, and they had left their mark on it. The ship was not just a relic of the past, it was a weapon powerful enough to destroy entire worlds. The Zalaran had found it, and they had made sure that no one else could use it. Now, Lyra and her team were left with a choice: use the weapon to fight back, or risk everything to uncover the true purpose of the ship. Either way, the war for humanity's future had just begun. The decision weighed heavily on Lyra's shoulders as she stared at the terminal before her. The ship had been a beacon of hope, a symbol of humanity's legacy, but now, it felt like a Pandora's box. The Zalaran had found it first, and whatever they had done to the ship, it was clear that they had left behind more than just their mark. They had altered something within it, something that could either be used to restore humanity or destroy it forever. As Lyra and her team explored the depths of the ancient vessel, they realized that the ship was far more than a mere relic. It was a living entity, its systems interconnected in ways that defied human understanding. The crew had barely begun to scratch the surface when they discovered a series of encrypted files buried deep within the ship's central core. These files, when unlocked, revealed the true nature of the ship's power. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a prototype for a new kind of technology, one that could harness the energy of entire star systems. The Zalaran had altered the ship's core to control this energy, turning it into a superweapon capable of wiping out entire civilizations with a single strike. The same technology that had once been used to build humanity's greatest ships was now twisted into a tool of destruction. Lyra's mind raced as she processed the information. If they could reverse the Zalaran's modifications, they could restore the ship to its original purpose, a tool for exploration, a symbol of humanity's potential. But the stakes were high. If they failed, the Zalaran would have a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, and humanity would be doomed before it even had a chance to rise again. "We can't let the Zalaran have this," Kieran said, his voice grim as he scanned the data. "They'll use it to wipe us out. To wipe everyone out." Ilara, who had been silently studying the ship's systems, nodded. "But we can't just reverse their changes without understanding the full scope of what they've done. This ship's power could destroy us all if we don't proceed carefully." Lyra clenched her fists, her heart pounding. She knew Ilara was right. They had no choice but to move forward carefully. They had come this far, and they could not afford to make a mistake. They needed to unlock the full potential of the ship, before the Zalaran arrived to finish what they had started. But as they worked, time was running out. The Zalaran were closing in, and every minute they spent deciphering the ship's systems brought them closer to a confrontation. The crew had no choice but to split up. Lyra and Ilara would work on the ship's core, while Kieran and Eric would fortify the ship's defenses and prepare for the worst. "Once we've cracked the code, we'll need to move fast," Lyra said, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "We don't know how much time we have before the Zalaran find us." The team got to work, each of them focused on their task, but the pressure was mounting. Every beep and hum from the ship's systems felt like an alarm, signaling that the Zalaran were only moments away from finding them. Lyra's mind raced as she reviewed the data, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place one by one. It was then that Lyra discovered something even more disturbing. The Zalaran hadn't just modified the ship's core, they had integrated their own technology into it, making it impossible to access the ship's systems without triggering a failsafe. The ship's artificial intelligence, once a neutral observer, had been corrupted by the Zalaran, turning it into an enemy that would resist any attempt to reverse their changes. Lyra's heart sank as she realized the full scope of the danger they faced. They weren't just up against the Zalaran, they were up against the ship itself. "We need to disconnect the AI," Ilara said, her voice tight with urgency. "Otherwise, we'll never regain control." "But we can't just shut it down," Lyra replied. "If we disconnect it improperly, we could trigger the self-destruct sequence. We'd all be dead before we had a chance to do anything." Kieran's voice crackled over the comms, his tone edged with urgency. "We don't have time for a perfect solution. The Zalaran are almost here. We need to make a decision, now." Lyra hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks. But in the end, there was no choice. They had come too far to turn back now. "Do it," she ordered. "We have to risk it." Elara nodded, and with a few quick keystrokes, she initiated the shutdown sequence. The air around them seemed to crackle with energy as the ship's AI protested, fighting against their attempts to regain control. The walls of the ship groaned, as if the very structure of the vessel was resisting their efforts. Lyra's heart raced as the countdown began. It felt like an eternity before the final confirmation appeared on the screen. "Systems disengaged," Elara announced, breathing a sigh of relief. "We've got control." But the victory was short-lived. As the AI fell silent, the ship's alarms began to blare. The Zalaran had found them. The ship's sensors had picked up their fleet, and they were moments away from arriving. "We don't have much time," Lyra said, turning to her team. "Prepare for battle. We can't let them take this ship." The crew moved quickly, scrambling to their positions. The ship's weapons were still functional, but they would need to be manually activated. Lyra's hands trembled as she activated the first weapon system, knowing that this would be their only chance to hold off the Zalaran. But as the ship's exterior lit up with energy, Lyra couldn't help but wonder, was this truly humanity's salvation, or had they just unleashed a force that could bring about their destruction? There was no turning back now. The war had begun. The Zalaran fleet emerged from hyperspace, its sleek, menacing ships surrounding the ancient vessel in a circle of inevitable doom. The hum of the ship's weapons systems filled the control room as Lyra and her team worked furiously to prepare for the coming onslaught. They had barely regained control of the ship, and now, they had to use its formidable power to hold off the very enemies who had sought to wipe humanity from the galaxy. Lyra's mind raced as she watched the Zalaran ships approach. They were relentless, their tactics cold and calculated. The Zalaran didn't make mistakes. They would strike with precision, cutting through the human ship's defenses with ruthless efficiency. The only advantage Lyra had was the element of surprise, and the ship's ancient weapons systems, still untested and unrefined. Kieran moved quickly to the weapons console, his eyes scanning the data as he worked. "We've got energy reserves," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "But we're going to have to use it sparingly. If we don't hit them hard enough, they'll adapt too quickly." Elara was at the communications console, her fingers flying over the keys. "I'm locking out the AI's last sequence," she said. "It'll make it harder for them to adapt to our movements. But I can't promise it'll hold long." Lyra's breath quickened. She had never been in a battle like this. She had read about the wars, heard the stories, but now it was her turn to fight, not just for survival, but for the legacy of humanity. "Activate the main weapon," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We need to make a statement. A powerful one." With a deep, resonating hum, the ancient ship's weapons systems powered up. The Zalaran fleet remained at a distance, seemingly confident, their ships lined up in perfect formation. They expected an easy victory. But the humans had something they didn't anticipate. The ship's energy, harnessed from the stars themselves, was far more powerful than anything the Zalaran had encountered. Lyra's fingers hovered over the command interface. "Firing in 3, 2, 1. The ship's weapons unleashed a surge of energy, a beam of brilliant light that cut through the darkness of space. It slammed into the lead Zalaran ship, tearing through its shields and hull with frightening speed. The enemy vessel shuddered under the impact before exploding in a flash of fiery destruction. The Zalaran fleet reacted instantly, opening fire on the human ship with a barrage of energy blasts. The ship's hull groaned as the blast struck, but the human ship's advanced shields held firm, holding off the worst of the assault. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the carnage unfold on the holographic display. "We've got their attention now," Kieran said grimly as he powered up the next set of weapons. "Keep firing. Don't give them a chance to regroup." Elara was working feverishly to maintain their advantage, rerouting power and blocking enemy tracking systems. "They're adapting," she said, her voice strained. "They're learning fast. We need to take out their command ship or they'll overwhelm us." Lyra nodded. She knew that their only hope was to cripple the Zalaran leadership. If they could destroy the command ship, they could scatter the Zalaran fleet and buy themselves enough time to escape. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot they had. "All weapons on the command ship," she ordered, determination settling over her. "We hit them now, while they're still reeling from the first strike. We can't let them recover." The crew worked in a frenzy, their fingers flying across consoles and controls as the ship's weapons locked onto the largest Zalaran ship, its dark silhouette looming in the distance. Lyra watched the targeting display, her heart racing as the ship's main guns powered up. The Zalaran were retaliating in force, but they hadn't yet anticipated the ferocity of the human strike. "Firing now," Kieran said, his voice tense. Another wave of energy surged from the human ship, and this time, the blast hit the Zalaran command ship square in its center. The explosion was cataclysmic, a massive eruption of light and debris that sent shockwaves rippling through the surrounding ships. The Zalaran command ship shattered, its fragments scattering into the void of space. The remaining Zalaran ships hesitated, their tactical coordination thrown into disarray. Without their leadership, they became vulnerable, their once precise strikes now more chaotic and less effective. The human ship capitalized on this confusion, firing off precise shots that crippled the enemy fleet one by one. Slowly, the tide of battle began to turn. But the victory was not without its cost. The human ship had taken heavy damage, and its hull was starting to buckle under the strain. The shields were weakening, and Lyra could feel the vibrations of the ship as it struggled to stay intact. They had won the battle, but at what price? "Damage reports are coming in," Elara said, her voice tight with urgency. "We're going to need to patch up the ship if we want to make it out of here in one piece." "We don't have time for that," Lyra replied, staring at the remnants of the Zalaran fleet. "We've done enough damage to them. Now we need to leave before they regroup. Set course for the closest uncharted system. We'll make repairs there." Kieran nodded, setting the ship's coordinates. "We'll get them, Lyra. We'll get them all." As the crew made their way to the escape route, Lyra stood at the bridge, watching the wreckage of the Zalaran fleet dissipate into the distance. Their message had been sent. Humanity was no longer a forgotten relic of the past. They had struck back with power and fury, reminding the galaxy of the tenacity and resilience that had always defined their species. But this was only the beginning. The Zalaran were not the only force that had a stake in the galaxy's future. And now that humanity had made its presence known again, it was only a matter of time before the others would come either as allies or enemies. But Lyra was ready. Humanity would never be forgotten again, and she would do whatever it took to ensure that its legacy lived on. The galaxy had just been reminded of what it had lost, and Lyra knew that it would never be the same again. The journey to the uncharted system was tense and fraught with uncertainty. The ship limped through the vast emptiness of space, its hull battered and scarred from the battle with the Zalaran. The crew, though victorious, was worn thin. Their bodies ached, their minds exhausted. But their mission was far from over. Lyra stood in the observation deck, staring out into the void. The stars seemed distant, unfeeling. Yet, she felt a connection to them, a strange sense of belonging. Humanity had once ruled the stars, and now, against all odds, they were returning. The Zalaran had been just the first obstacle in their path. Lyra knew that much darker forces lurked out there, forces that had taken note of humanity's return. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. The ship's systems had stabilized somewhat, but they were far from being fully repaired. The crew worked in shifts, patching up whatever they could while staying vigilant for any sign of the Zalaran, or worse, other enemies, approaching. Elara was hunched over a terminal in the engineering bay, trying to salvage what she could from the wreckage of the ship's core systems. "I've rerouted the auxiliary power to keep the shields up," she said, not looking up from her work. "But it won't hold for long. We need to find a safe place to repair properly, or we'll be sitting ducks." "We'll make it," Lyra said, her voice unwavering. "We don't have a choice." Kieran and Eric were monitoring the long-range scanners, keeping watch for any signs of the Zalaran. The fleet had scattered, but Lyra knew that it wouldn't be long before they regrouped and came after them again. The Zalaran wouldn't let go of such a valuable asset, an ancient human ship with technology they could barely comprehend. They would stop at nothing to recapture it. As the ship approached the uncharted system, Lyra's thoughts wandered back to the data they had uncovered in the Zalaran-occupied ship. The ancient human archive had contained far more than they had anticipated. It held blueprints for advanced technologies, designs for weapons, and, most intriguingly, records of experiments that hinted at an even older civilization, one that had influenced humanity's rise to power. The crew had only begun to scratch the surface of what they had found, but Lyra was certain that these discoveries held the key to humanity's resurgence. But the more she dug into the archives, the more questions arose. The ship was not just a human relic, it was part of something far greater. Something that had been lost to time. And the Zalarans' interest in the ship wasn't just about its weapons. There was something else they were after. Something they had been searching for across the galaxy for centuries. There's something else, Lyra murmured to herself as she scanned the last of the data. The Zalaran were looking for more than just the ship. They were looking for something buried deep within the archives. Kieran's voice crackled through the comms. Lyra, you're going to want to see this. She quickly made her way to the bridge, where Kieran and Eric were staring at the sensors. A small, unknown object had appeared on the long-range scanners, drifting in the outer reaches of the system. At first, it seemed like nothing more than debris, a piece of shattered rock or an abandoned satellite. But as it drew closer, the shape became clearer. It's a ship, Eric said, squinting at the screen. An old one, but not like any human vessel we've ever seen. The ship was a strange sight, sleek, almost organic in design, with curves and angles that defied conventional engineering. It glowed faintly, as if pulsing with some kind of energy. It wasn't human. It wasn't Zalaran. It was something else entirely. Lyra's pulse quickened as she studied the unfamiliar vessel. It had to be related to the ancient civilization that had left behind the ship they had just discovered. This was no random encounter. This was a message, a sign that there were still more pieces to the puzzle, more pieces to the legacy of humanity and the galaxy's forgotten history. I think we need to approach it, Lyra said, her voice steady. This could be the key to everything. Kieran nodded, setting the course to intercept the mysterious ship. The crew worked in unison to prepare the ship for the approach, but Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. The Zalaran could still be watching, and this new ship could be more than just a discovery. It could be another weapon, one that had been hidden away for reasons they could only guess at. As they drew closer to the strange vessel, the tension aboard the ship was palpable. The crew exchanged wary glances, their minds racing with possibilities. What if this ship was a weapon like the one they had uncovered? What if it was something far worse, something that could threaten not just humanity's future, but the entire galaxy? The comms crackled to life. This is Captain Lyra of the human vessel Rising Star, Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. We're approaching your ship. Please respond. There was a long pause before a response came through. The voice on the other end was neither human nor Zalaran. It was strange, distant, as though it came from another time entirely. Humanity, we have waited long for your return. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. The voice spoke in perfect galactic standard, but there was something about it that was unnerving. It wasn't just a warning, it was a statement of fact. Whoever, or whatever, was speaking, they knew humanity was coming back, and they had been waiting for it. Who are you? Lyra asked, her voice tight. We are the keepers of the legacy, the voice responded. And you are the ones who will decide the fate of your people. Before Lyra could respond, the strange ship opened a communication channel, and a map of the galaxy appeared on the screen. It showed a location deep in the uncharted regions, a place where no human ship had ever ventured. A place that held the secrets to humanity's past, and its future. The voice came again, more insistent now. Come to us, Lyra. Come to the heart of the galaxy. Your journey is only just beginning. As the transmission cut off, Lyra stood frozen, her mind racing. There was no turning back now. Whoever had contacted them, whoever was behind this strange vessel, held the answers they needed. But it was a gamble, one that could lead them to salvation, or to their destruction. The crew exchanged uncertain glances, but Lyra's mind was made up. "Set course for the coordinates," she ordered, her voice steady. "We've come this far. Let's see where this leads." As the ship changed course and headed into the unknown, Lyra could only wonder what awaited them. Whatever it was, it would change everything. And humanity's place in the galaxy would never be the same again. The journey to the unknown coordinates was slow, the ship limping along at a fraction of its full speed. Lyra stood in the command center, her eyes fixed on the map of the galaxy that now dominated the holographic display. The uncharted region ahead was a place no one had dared venture, filled with mysteries that had remained untouched for centuries. There were no charts, no records, only the faintest hints of something ancient and hidden. It was a void in the galaxy, until now. Lyra glanced at her crew, all of them on edge. The strange ship they had encountered, its mysterious message, the promise of a lost legacy, it was all so much to take in. Her mind buzzed with questions. Who had been waiting for humanity's return? Why had they chosen now, when humanity was so fragmented and scattered across the stars, to make contact? And what was the legacy they spoke of? Was it something humanity was meant to reclaim, or something they should fear? Kieran broke the silence, his voice low and wary. "We're getting close. Sensors are picking up unusual energy readings. Whatever's out there, it's not natural." Ilara, still working in the engineering bay, had been keeping the ship together with little more than sheer willpower. "We're barely holding together," she reported, her voice strained over the comms. "The ship's systems are fine for now, but any unexpected fluctuations could push us over the edge. We need to find a place to land and repair if we're going to make it through whatever's ahead." "I know," Lyra replied, her voice tense. "We'll make it." The crew fell into a silence that was filled with the quiet hum of the ship's failing systems. Lyra couldn't ignore the feeling of unease creeping through her. The Zalaran were still out there, no doubt regrouping, and they would come after them again. But it was more than just that. There was something deeply unsettling about the voice they had heard over the comms, as if it had known them before they had even made their intentions clear. Then, as the ship ventured deeper into the uncharted region, the strange energy readings grew stronger. There was a pulse, like the heartbeat of the galaxy itself, emanating from a distant planet. The source was beyond the outskirts of the system, its intensity nearly overwhelming their sensors. Whatever it was powerful, and it was waiting for them. Lyra set the ship's course directly for the planet. It was their only option. Hours passed in a tense, wordless journey through the dark expanse. The ship's internal lights flickered as the power reserves dwindled, and the crew could do nothing but hold their breath. They were approaching something ancient, something beyond their understanding, and Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to reveal something far more significant than they had ever imagined. As they reached the orbit of the mysterious planet, the ship's hull groaned under the stress, and the energy fluctuations were now overwhelming. Lyra clenched her fists, her knuckles white as she stared at the screen. The planet was a dark, swirling mass of storms, its surface shrouded in clouds that seemed to pulse with an eerie energy. But there was something on the surface, a structure, impossibly ancient, its shape unlike anything they had seen before. It was massive, its proportions stretching far beyond what human architecture could even conceive. Kieran's voice crackled over the comms. "Lyra, are we sure we want to land there? The readings are off the charts. It's like the planet itself is alive." "I don't think we have a choice," Lyra said, her voice determined. "This is the place we were meant to find. The legacy is here." They entered the planet's atmosphere, the ship's systems shaking violently as they descended toward the surface. The ship's exterior began to glow with the heat of re-entry, and for a moment, Lyra wondered if they would even survive the landing. But somehow, they broke through the clouds, and there it was, the structure. Rising from the planet's surface, it was an impossible tower, its edges sharp and jagged, yet it emanated a sense of ancient power. It was as if the building itself was a living monument, its purpose forgotten by the ages. The ship touched down in a clearing near the structure. The landing was rough, and the ship's frame groaned with the impact, but they had made it. Lyra's heart was racing in her chest as the crew began to gather their things. "Stay close," Lyra ordered, her voice low. "We don't know what we're walking into." They made their way out of the ship, the air heavy and thick with an unnatural humidity. The planet felt alive in a way that was both terrifying and awe-inspiring. As they walked toward the structure, the ground beneath them seemed to hum, as if it were responding to their presence. The towering spires of the ancient edifice loomed ahead, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch impossibly far. At the entrance, Lyra stopped. There were markings on the door, strange symbols, almost like a language, but older than anything humanity had ever seen. The markings seemed to pulse with light, glowing faintly as the crew approached. "What do you think it is?" Kieran asked, stepping forward to examine the door. "I think it's a message," Lyra replied. "A message from whoever built this place. Whoever has been waiting for us." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the moment settling over them. Then, with a quiet hiss, the doors began to open, revealing an interior bathed in a soft, blue glow. The air inside was cooler, and the walls were lined with more of those strange symbols. The crew stepped inside, their footsteps echoing in the vast, silent space. As they moved further in, they began to feel the presence of something ancient, something powerful. Lyra could almost hear a whisper, like the faintest hint of a voice from the past. "We're not alone," Lyra whispered, her voice tinged with awe. And then, at the heart of the structure, they saw it, a massive, glowing orb, suspended in the air by an unseen force. The orb pulsed with light, and Lyra felt an inexplicable pull toward it. This was it, the legacy they had been searching for. And as they approached, Lyra knew that this discovery would change everything. They had found the heart of the galaxy's secrets, and now, they would learn whether they were the inheritors of this power or its destroyers. The orb before them was unlike anything Lyra had ever seen. It hovered in the center of a vast chamber, its surface shifting with colors that seemed to ripple like liquid. The glow pulsed in time with the rhythm of Lyra's heartbeat, drawing her closer, almost as if it were calling her. Her crew stood behind her, tense and unsure, their eyes fixed on the strange, otherworldly object. "I've never seen anything like this," Kieran said, his voice hushed. "It's beautiful, but I don't know if we should be this close." "I don't think we have a choice," Lyra replied, her eyes narrowing as she took another step forward. She could feel it now, the presence that surrounded the orb. It was as if the very air hummed with the energy of the galaxy itself, ancient and powerful. This wasn't just technology. This was something more. Ilara, who had been silent until now, took a step forward, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The readings I'm getting are off the scale," she said, her fingers dancing over the data pad. "This energy, it's not just power. It's some kind of signal, a link to something. It's alive." Lyra turned to her, meeting her eyes. "Alive?" "I think so," Ilara replied, her voice uncertain. "It's like a living organism, a machine that thinks. Maybe this is what they meant when they said we were the ones to decide the fate of our people." Lyra swallowed hard, her mind racing. The message they had received, the strange voice that had reached out to them across the stars, suddenly made more sense. Whoever had built this place, whoever had left behind this orb, had known that humanity would come, that they would uncover the legacy. But why? What did they want from humanity? Taking a deep breath, Lyra turned back to the orb, her steps slow and deliberate. It wasn't just a relic. It wasn't a weapon, not in the traditional sense. This was a key, a doorway to something greater. But to what? As she stepped closer, the orb pulsed brighter, its light intensifying. A low hum began to resonate throughout the chamber, vibrating in Lyra's chest. It was as if the entire structure was alive, reacting to their presence. Then, without warning, the light flared, and the room was filled with a blinding glow. For a moment, Lyra could see nothing but white light. Her heart raced as the hum of the orb grew louder, almost deafening. And then, suddenly, the light vanished, leaving them in a deep, unnatural silence. Before them stood a figure. It was tall, its features shadowed by the glow of the orb. It wasn't human, not entirely. Its form was sleek, almost fluid, and its skin shimmered with a metallic sheen. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. This was no ordinary being. "You have come," the figure spoke, its voice like 1,000 whispers blending together. It was both familiar and alien, as though it transcended language itself. Lyra took a step forward, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain composed. "Who are you? What is this place?" The figure regarded her with eyes that glowed softly, though there was no visible source of light. "We are the architects, the creators of the legacy you have uncovered. We are the ones who shaped the stars, who seeded life across the galaxy. We have waited for the one who would awaken this power." Lyra's mind spun. The architects, the creators of the very galaxy they lived in? This was more than anything they had ever imagined. She tried to keep her voice steady. "Why us? Why humanity?" The figure seemed to pause, as if considering the question carefully. "Because humanity is unique. You have the ability to choose, to shape your destiny. Unlike the other races, who are bound by the past, you can forge a future." "Forge a future?" Lyra repeated, a mix of hope and uncertainty in her voice. "How?" "The orb," the figure said, its voice growing softer, more resonant. "The energy you feel, the power contained within it, is not just the past, it is the future. The knowledge of the architects is encoded within this energy, waiting to be unlocked. But only those with the will to wield it can access its full potential." Lyra's heart pounded as she processed this. The future of humanity was now in her hands, more than she had ever dreamed. The knowledge, the power to shape the galaxy, it was all within reach. But there was a price. There always was. "And what happens if we don't unlock it?" Lyra asked. The figure's expression remained unreadable, but there was an unmistakable heaviness in its words. "If you fail to understand and control it, the power will turn against you. It will consume you and everything you hold dear. The choice is yours, Lyra. Humanity's future lies in your hands." For a moment, everything was still. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, the enormity of it threatening to crush her. This was no longer just about survival, about fighting the Zalaran, about finding a way home. This was about shaping the future of the galaxy, about determining humanity's place among the stars. "We can do this," Kieran said from behind her, his voice firm. "We've fought for survival this long. Now it's time to fight for something greater." Lyra turned to look at her crew. They were all there, their faces a mixture of fear, hope, and resolve. They had been through so much together, faced impossible odds, and come out stronger each time. This was no different. They had survived the past, and now they had the chance to shape the future. She turned back to the figure, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. "We'll unlock it. We'll learn to wield this power. And we will make sure humanity is never forgotten again." The figure nodded, its expression unreadable. "Then go forth, and be the creators of your own destiny." As Lyra and her crew approached the orb, the energy within it surged once more, filling the chamber with a blinding light. Lyra felt it then, the knowledge, the potential, flowing into her like a tide of cosmic energy. She could feel the galaxy itself in her mind, the threads of destiny intertwining with her own. This was just the beginning. The architects had given them the power to shape the future, but it was up to humanity to decide how that future would unfold. And Lyra knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The galaxy would never be the same again. And neither would humanity.